When the chaos of popular culture makes your brain hurt, you really need belief in the form of a transfusion of analysis and humor. It's time for a Pop-oration. Join hosts Eric and Stacey as they dissect popular culture one bloody organ at a time. It's just what the doctor ordered.
It's Pop-oration. I'm Stacey.
I'm Eric. And today we're going to talk about...
Oh, brother.
That.
Yeah.
We did a show a little while back on sisters in pop cultures. Sisters, there were never such devoted sisters.
And this is not at all about that.
Kind of. It's the dude version of that show. And I think what we were interested in exploring was, what does pop culture tell us about these sibling relationships, and does gender make a difference? Because there is a sister story feels different than a brother story.
It's going to be a story. It's going to be different, and I think that part of that is the whole gender thing. Is that, and it is different as we've talked between brothers and sisters. If you're, you have a sister, I do have a brother, I have a sister as well, but that brother sister thing is different from a brother or a sister. Yeah. And we were talking before about the sister, and now we're talking about the brother. I do think gender comes into play, though, because how you are treated, how society raises you as a boy versus a girl impacts how you feel about yourself, what you feel your options and opportunities are. And then if you have, a sibling who is the same sex, then is that now competition, the sibling rivalry? Sometimes. Or is it a support system because they understand what you're going, there's all of this stuff.
I think it in life, it obviously can go either way. And I think for most of us, our adult siblings are either we're close to them or we're not. And if we are close to them, they are more supportive than anything else. They're the people who've known us the longest in our lives. I don't think that makes for great movies. To be like, oh, look how supportive we are. I mean, conflict just drives stories.
Correct. You have to have some kind of drama. And so I think that stories are going to be when there is that lack of support. Although we did talk about Sisters that Tina Fey and Amy Poehler did. And it had a very supportive sister there, as did Little Women, that kind of thing. Yep. And in some of the movies we're going to talk about, there is also that support system. Because I think here's the thing, whether it's whatever kind of relationship it is with a sibling, whether it's brother or sister, brother, whatever, I think the deal is that you have this commonality. Usually, again, there are different kinds of families, but you have, a lot of times you have the same exact parents. You were raised by the same two parents. Yep. Now, sometimes there may be a blended, so, Brady Bunch, and so it's different. But so you have these commonalities of, you all were raised at the same house. You had the same, neighbors. You went to the same schools. So there were friends. But there were commonalities that, experiences. You went, everybody went to Thanksgiving together at the same time. So you remember those. So that when you're older, that's what you're drawing on. That whole, remember when we, or I remember when you fill in the blank, and that meant something to me. And so now I have this feeling for you. So as adults, we're, closer or whatever. But I think it's that common raising, that common growing up time that is where you're going to have more potential to have the support system when you're older, but also sometimes because you do know some of the same things, and when we talked about this in the Thanksgiving holiday movies show, is that, especially like Home for the Holidays, is that there's more drama because I remember when you used to do this to me, and I'm now 30 years later still bitter about it.
Well, as adult, and most of the movies we're going to talk about today deal with adult siblings. And I think that on the one hand, yes, there's that shared history. A lot of times you are kind of thrust together as families. The first movie we're going to talk about has to do with finances, is what kind of brings those two brothers initially together. But it's also that sense of, it's the same thing we talked about with the Sisters episode, is that these are people who are in your life and they might be very close to you and you did not choose them.
Yes.
This was, fate chose them for you. And by the way, these are your siblings. it's funny. When I first started looking at these, my initial sense was it doesn't seem as competitive as the sisters' storylines had a tendency to be. And now I'm questioning that, because after I look at a lot of these, there are quite a few instances here where there is some competition between these brothers. And that's just an interesting dynamic. And again, I think that's mostly because these are stories that we're trying to tell, and conflict tends to drive a plot line. And so if you're going to focus on a brotherly relationship, having that conflict between the two is going to be a way to explore where that relationship goes.
I agree, but I will also say that I think you're also right in that two women, and it's a misogynistic kind of thing, in that for guys, you can have the heir and the spare. There's no competition because they each have their role to play. Whereas if there's two sisters, it's like only one of you can prevail. Only one is going to, da cambio one. I think I'm going to try to do that accent and that line in every single podcast from now on.
Really? Is that going to be what we're going to do here?
Maybe not, but it made me laugh for a minute. But my point being that I think there is that idea of pitting two women together or against each other. Yeah. Whereas for men, you do have that. And in these movies, there is some of that regular sibling rivalry. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's like, we're going to get together so we can kick ass or whatever. I don't know.
A movie that we didn't put on our list to get into with a lot of detail in this one is the Blues Brothers. Because it's not really
They're
about...
not brothers.
I think they are.
Well, there's step or something.
No, well, they're both. Well, anyway,
they're not brothers.
But they're the Blues Brothers, and we didn't because really that movie is such a weird, kind of road trippy. It's not a road trip, but it's this whole
it's not about
it doesn't explore their relationship, but it is interesting that they're just on each other's side the entire time. But it's not about that, but it is. You can put two brothers on a screen and just have that be the thing, so long as there's another plot that we're going towards. If it's going to be, but as soon as you start exploring the relationship between two people, you've got to bring in some kind of conflict, or there's no story.
The first one is an interesting one, and I'm sure it probably came to everybody's mind when one talks to brothers, if you were around in the 90s. Rain Man.
Yeah.
You got Tom Cruise, you got Dustin Hoffman, and we're not going to belabor any of the drama there, but this was, however you feel about what's going on with him. But it was an Oscar nomination. Did he win this one?
I think Dustin won the Oscar for
which,
this.
Of course, I have my theories about, if you die or you play somebody who's mentally
have a disability,
you're going to win. Anyway, here's what I'm going to say. Basically, so Tom Cruise, his dad dies, who he has been estranged from. His dad says, because we've been estranged, I'm not giving you anything except a car. And done and done.
And this is Tom Cruise at his Tom Cruisiness. It's just...
Yeah, it's him in the middle of, Top Gun, everything. This was him at the pinnacle of his mid to late 20s-ishness.
Yeah. And he plays a young playboy asshole well.
He does. He really does. Now, what happens is he's like, so where is all the money going that my dad had? And there's it's in a trust. And it takes him a while. He finally figures out they're taking care of this person at this assisted living type place, and have done for a long time. So he's like, well, he's going to go and figure this out. And he's told, by the way, it's your brother. Now, Tom is, I guess, 25, 27, something like that. He has a business where he's a car salesman or importer, if you will, but stakes are very high for him. He needs money.
Yep.
And so, but I think it's important that he's a salesman, because that comes into play in this, his personality. But anyway, he goes and he meets this guy, Dustin Hoffman, who plays his older brother, and Tom doesn't remember him. He never discussed,
and what was the age spread between these two?
I want to say it's about 13, 14 years.
Okay.
Something like that. I feel like I remember him saying that.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen this movie, but it seemed like it was longer. It was like, that Dustin Hoffman was almost an adult when Tom Cruise was born.
Well, then he was 16 or something that. So Tom Cruise is, trying to take guardianship of him so that he can have access to the money. And it's a road trip. You know, he ends up, quote, kidnapping him from the facility. And so then it's a road trip, and they go to Vegas where, of course, he has a form of autism, and they called it idiot savant. So that, you know, if like matches were dropped on the floor, his character can tell you immediately how many.
Which was part of my thing with this movie is that, you know, first of all, I think it was America's introduction to autism in a lot of ways.
Well, I'm going to say one thing I was going to say is we have learned a lot about autism since this was made.
Yeah. And he had just about every kind of autism you can possibly imagine all wrapped up into one character. I mean, he had so many savant capabilities.
OCD.
It's just, you know, completely stretches the reality of this particular thing. But where it really matters to the plot is he has an ability to count cards.
Correct. That's right. And so, you know, he goes to Vegas, and, you know, they make some money. There is a girlfriend in there played by some Italian actress. I don't think, which she's cute and all that, but it didn't really matter. It didn't really matter. She could connect with Dustin. But what I remember when it came out, everybody was at Wapner at 3.
Yeah.
Judge Wapner.
And I'm a very good driver.
Court.
I'm a very good driver.
Very good driver.
Yeah.
Very good driver. But what we learn also during this road trip is obviously they get to know each other, and especially Tom's character, because there's only so much that Dustin's autistic, Raymond, can learn and can change, can evolve. So it's Tom's character who's evolving throughout this movie, and
it's really Tom Cruise's movie. I mean, in every kind of sense of the word, from a storytelling standpoint.
From a storytelling
he's the one who changes. He's the one who drives the entire story. I mean, Dustin Hoffman is a kind of a passive figure.
But he's the shiny object, man. When he is on the screen, that's who you're watching. Yeah. And you're watching, basically, Tom react to stuff that happens with or, you know, around Dustin. Yeah. But what Tom realizes is that back in what happened was Tom was a baby, maybe 2 or 3 years old. And the whole reason that he didn't know he had a brother, that Raymond was put away, and where the title comes from, when early on Tom is realizing that his business is, you know, the stakes, he's about to lose it, and he tries to calm himself, and he starts singing himself a song about the Rain Man will come, and da-da-da, and it calms him. It's this thing, this mantra he kind of says to himself. What he realizes is that Rain Man was his 2-year-old version's ability to say the word Raymond. Yeah. And that Dustin Hoffman's character would come and sing him this song to make him feel better. Yep. And at one point he goes, "Oh my God, you're the Rain Man?" Yeah. And there is this moment where he's like, "Holy crap, I have met you before." Yep.
And I loved you, and you were my brother. You were my big brother.
And at the end, there is this feeling, and you know, it's a happy ending for what it is. You know, my takeaway was there's a lot we've learned about autism since then. Yeah. So it's very simplistic, and you know, you sit there and I kind of shrugged and went, yeah, I guess you got an Oscar.
He played the disease very well.
He played the disease, and he didn't, you know, so there is that.
And yet he had to be the kind of person, you know, with enough kind of, you know, he always had that kind of, you know, his head would kind of tilt a little bit to one side, and he had a slightly vacant look in his eye. He played the quirks very consistently.
I mean, he's a really good actor
throughout. He's very, very good. There's no question. But he also had he had to have a glimmer of something that Tom Cruise could connect to. But from an acting standpoint, in terms of, you know, where you make those choices of where a character grows and changes, Tom Cruise is the only character in this movie between the two of them who grows and changes. Right. Pretty easy to state. Raymond's the same Raymond you meet in the last frame as you did in the first.
Now, they do have him warm up, and in the end, when he's asked who you want to be with, he says he wants to be with his brother. And he clearly remembers when he would sing to his brother as a baby. But one reason he was put away was because they were afraid he would hurt the baby. Yeah. Unintentionally.
Sure.
But that's what happened is the mother died, and the father was an asshole. The father was a complete asshole. Yep. And so he wasn't, you know, I think that the mother probably kept Raymond in the house until once she died, though. The father was like, let's put him away where I can't see him. That kind of thing.
And then you just have to think about, like, what a horrible choice to, like, never tell your younger son that, by the way, you have an older brother.
Never to remind him. I mean, I guess that's kind of the thing, because they did obviously know each other when they were younger. You do see that, as I said, Dustin does kind of warm up, and you do see him learning things and learning how to adjust. And adapt to certain things. Maybe adjust is the better word. He didn't really adapt so much. But you're right. It is Tom Cruise getting to know this brother and his quirks and his personality. I mean, Tom goes in and sees him and says, oh, he is completely useless to me. Then he finds he does have uses, i.e. he can count the cards. Yeah. But then he realizes he also is this
sweet person. And he can memorize the phone book.
Correct.
I mean, every single... It's almost a superhero movie, the amount of stuff that Dustin Hoffman can do.
You're right. He was all over the chart as far as what he could do. But again, you're right.
Idiot savant.
But it was, in a lot of ways, America's first introduction to autism in a character in big screen in a big movie. The relationship, again, because he was kind of the same Raymond at the beginning as he was at the end, it's hard to say... There was a lot. There was some growth there, and it really was a road trip movie and a buddy movie.
Well, it was about this asshole who becomes a human being. Yeah. Who just realizes there's a world outside of his skin and that other people have needs and a story, and it's just not all about give me my goddamn inheritance.
But I will say, as a movie, it is certainly for that time. It was entertaining. And it was well done. Barry Levinson is a good director. Yes. So the scenes are
lovely. We'll talk about later on this season.
We do, with Dustin Hoffman again. Yeah. But as I said, it's one of those where you see this brother relationship, whereas here you have Tom Cruise, who has gone all his life thinking he's an only child, to then seeing that he has a brother and having to figure out a way to be the caregiver, but also, then when he really does realize and learns to love him, to be this person who can, help him and that he can be dependent on. Yeah. And so I think that the idea was it was a very sweet kind of evolution.
Yeah, I was in high school when this movie came out, and I was one of those weird kids who actually liked to watch the Oscars, and I wanted to go see all the Oscar movies. Like, I wanted to kind of be up on that. So I was an unusual high school child. This came out my senior year of high school, and I remember, hearing, oh, there's this movie coming out, and we think it's going to be big Oscar bait, and Dustin Hoffman and Tom Cruise play brothers. And we went, what? That sounds so weird. And, of course, once you know the specifics of the story, it makes total sense.
Now, what I will say, I do feel like, when you ask me what the age difference between the actors is way more than the age difference between the brothers. Okay? Yeah. I think Dustin could have played his dad.
Possibly.
I think the age difference. I didn't look it up, but I think so. It looked that way. When you look at them, it looks
and like I'm really drawing on my memory of what they looked like, and that's why I thought,
That's the thing. It looks like a bigger age difference than the 16 years or whatever it was.
In my memory, it was like, Dustin Hoffman was actually like an adult still living at home because, of course, he couldn't live anywhere else besides the home. He was always autistic from the time that he was born. So they could have written the movie where he was 25. And living at home, and we'd had this baby, and it's like, oh, now we need to put Dustin away. And I don't remember what the age difference was, but it was. I remember it being a very sweet movie.
But he's not 25. It's younger. He's a teenager when they put him away. Yeah. And so the difference between the brothers is actually less than the difference between the actors. Got it. And you can see that. But it was an interesting brother perspective, and it's one of those where suddenly you're a brother. Kind of thing. Yeah. And so you're watching, and in that respect, you're correct. Story-wise, it is Tom's movie. But performance-wise, Dustin stole every scene he was in.
Well, yeah, he had the his character was written to do that, but even as a high school senior, I remember hearing, okay, Dustin Hoffman was nominated for an Oscar, and I was like, what about Tom Cruise? Like, he did all the acting. Once you learn how to play the disease, you just have to show up and be consistent with that every single day, and it's a test of consistency. Yes. In terms of playing moments and that realization. I tell you what, you don't know what the hell Rain Man means until you discover what it means, and then I remember that was the lip quivering kind of moment of, oh my God. I mean, that was really affecting. It was very moving.
It was lovely. So, but it's Rain Man. It's a brother movie, but it is a different kind in that they don't know that they're brothers, or at least Tom doesn't know he's a brother until, 15, 20 minutes in. And so it is then about building a relationship where there was none, as opposed to, as we were talking about earlier, a common history. They don't have this.
But even though they did have that one memory.
They did have that one, correct.
And that's what cements that relationship, right?
So that's Rain Man. And we have some others that we wanted to talk about to kind of give some examples of brothers.
Oh, brother, where art thou?
You're listening to Popperation with Eric and Stacey. Take a deep breath. This may sting a little.
So the next movie on our list is not a brother movie.
It's not made to be about brothers.
It's not about brothers, but it contains one of the most iconic older brother, younger brother scenes in, I think, movie history. And so we decided we were going to talk about The Godfather Part 2.
Part 2, which a lot of people say is the best.
I like it a whole lot better than the first one.
Godfather movies, and nobody talks about 3.
Nobody talks about 3. Sofia Coppola just, when she replaced Winona Ryder, that's just kind of gone down. And I don't blame her for that.
And it's not her fault.
No,
it's her dad.
No, it wouldn't. But whatever. I like number 2 more than I like number 1. It's more
critically
entertaining.
acclaimed, and it's very much. Some parts of it I absolutely loved. I do say you do see what a wonderful director Coppola is.
Yes.
I mean, oh my gosh. Now Godfather 2 takes place after the events of Godfather 1. So there is...
And before.
Well, okay, yeah. But I mean, yes. Let me get to it. Okay, so that Pacino is now
the Don.
And so Marlon Brando is not in this one at all as Marlon Brando, but his character is, because it's a flashback. It's a twofer. This is like kind of a 2 movie in one.
Yeah.
In that you have back and forth going what's happening in the 50s with Pacino and the family that you've met in Godfather 1. But then you have, how did Marlon Brando become Vito, become the Don in Godfather 1? How did that happen? And you see the beginnings of Vito's life back in Sicily.
Yep. Now, I've actually seen the Godfather trilogy pasted together in such a way where somebody has edited the movie so it actually starts with Robert De Niro, tells that whole storyline kind of in one big thing, and then picks up with Godfather Part 1 and then gives you just the Al Pacino scenes from Godfather Part 2. I don't know that, first of all, I have no idea whether the De Niro scenes would hang together as a movie if you just saw them pasted together, boom, 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 because they really are vignettes, because each of these flashbacks just happens that way. So what we're here to talk about is the relationship between the brothers in this, Al Pacino as Michael and John Cazale as Fredo, who actually was the middle child in their family, the middle son, because they also have a sister.
Right.
Growing up, but James Caan, who played the oldest brother, appears very, very, very briefly at the very end of Godfather 2 in a flashback, but was killed in Godfather 1, and so is not around. So now it's kind of become an older brother, younger brother thing because the oldest child is not there. But as we've discussed a number of times, birth order matters. Fredo is such a middle child.
He really is.
He really is, just struggling to be noticed. And he's just, as a criminal, he's kind of incompetent.
He's incompetent. He's very incompetent. He doesn't have any confidence. Now, is this because when he was a little boy, he didn't, he wasn't supported that way? Very possibly. It doesn't matter. As a grown-up, he is really kind of useless.
Yeah, and Marlon Brando in the first film really wanted Michael to take over the family because James Caan was a hothead. He was a typical oldest child in that he was gung-ho for the family business, but a little too gung-ho.
And very confident.
Yes.
I mean, he had balls. He was, all up in it, but he was
but ultra-violent and really a hothead, and that got him killed. And Marlon Brando, wisely, if these 3 boys were your choice, whether the sister was going to ever be, she's interesting, and she was nominated for an Oscar for Godfather 2.
Talia Shire is good.
Yeah, and complicated. Very few scenes, but she's a complicated woman.
Now, what I will say is in the flashbacks, and we're talking about how it's not really. We're not here talking about Vito's story, but he has these children even when they were babies.
Yes.
He's holding Michael, the youngest baby at the time, saying, saying this is going to be yours, or you're going to do this, Michael. You're going to do this. He had all these hopes for Michael. So clearly, even when they were children.
And the flashback we get of Fredo is that he's got pneumonia. He was a sick baby.
Yeah, and that didn't help. That doesn't help with your confidence, and I get all of that.
Well, and also with your, budding mafioso Italian
what can you
father.
Do? You're not.
I mean, that's just
because you learn through Vita's story that strength. He learned that strength is what got you.
Yes.
And showing strength, and if you showed weakness, you died.
Yeah.
And so anybody, his sons needed to show strength all the time, and if you didn't, and even if it was something physical, and this is not the newest story in the world at all. No. Strong men not liking weak children because they feel like it shows on them. Yeah. So that was Fredo's lot in life.
Fredo probably lived with that his entire life, and now he's trying to make his own little mark in the world, while his little brother, who's very resentful of, is running the family. He is now the one who everyone kisses his ring and sucks up to him, and Fredo's just kind of off to the side. It also doesn't help that young Al Pacino looks like handsome young Al Pacino. Yeah. And John Cazale just looks like Fredo. Although, interestingly, John, was the love of young Meryl Streep's life.
Did not know that.
Yes, the two of them were a couple, and he died very young, and he was a very gifted, promising young actor. Well, they met on the set of The Deer Hunter. So he had The Deer Hunter. He had both of the Godfather movies. I mean, he was kind of that. He was in that club.
Getting ready to probably.
He was going to be huge, and he got a very aggressive form of cancer. And Meryl was with him the entire time. And if you read, she's written about this, and very touching kind of story. But yes, the two of them were inseparable.
He's very good because you do believe all of this and his struggles. You can see it in his face. He may not be saying a word, but you can see, people are lauding Michael and saying how he's great and all of this wonderful stuff and this and this and this, and and you're here kind of thing. But you can see everything he's thinking in his face. He's a wonderful actor, but again, this character is weak. These brothers, it's not, and it's frustrating for him. He's the middle child, and yet who's in charge? He is reliant. He is reliant on his baby brother. Yeah. It's very frustrating, and you see it in literally every scene that he has. Now, you have a favorite scene, which is a very good scene, but I'll let you.
Well, there's three scenes that kind of, the very first thing we see is that they're at this big kind of wedding celebration at the beginning in Oregon for whatever reason. It's just this,
No, it's not a wedding. It's the son. First communion or something like that.
Okay, so it's a
first communion.
So some kind of religious. But Fredo's wife gets drunk and out of control, and he can't control his wife, and so Michael has to step in and basically have his wife controlled by having her drag off, and Fredo kind of sits down next to Michael and apologizes, and so you see the dynamic between the two brothers right there. The big scene that I think is just the iconic one is after Michael has discovered that Fredo's doing his own thing. He didn't necessarily mean to betray the family, but he was too stupid to know that he was doing something counter to the family's interests. But his excuse was, it was something for me, Michael. They were going to give me something for me. He wanted to do something that he had complete ownership of. But it messed up Michael's plans, and so he was very, very upset. And the line that is kind of always remembered is, I'm smart. He kept on telling how smart he is, but he's so not smart.
Right.
And again, as actors, these two were absolutely evenly matched, but as characters, they were not at all. I mean, Fredo was just useless, as you say.
He seems very, very simple. Yeah. And he makes, and again, it's really like he cannot make a good decision. I mean, the decision, whatever he married, that woman is a nightmare. And what was interesting to me about that scene that you're talking about, so the woman is losing it, and she's just sloppy drunk all over the place. Michael says to his consigliere, I suppose it was, and says, go tell Fredo that either he controls his wife or I do. And so the guy goes over to Fredo and says, so Michael says you got to control your wife or I'm going to do it for you. And Fredo looks at him and says, I guess you better. That giving up.
Yep.
I mean, there was no pride of, no, I'll do it.
Yeah.
No, let me do it. It's my wife. I'll blah, blah, blah. You just saw him slump, the air go out of his tires, and he went, I guess you better do
And you just saw him try to control her. I mean, it's a terrible misogynistic conversation we're having, but it was a good portrait of this mafioso family.
This has nothing to do with misogyny and that. This is the part of the story that's going on, is that we're talking about that. So it was, but his character just couldn't do it. No. And he was also aware he couldn't do it. Yeah. And it was very sad. But that scene, as you said, very first 10, 15 minutes of the movie, and you find out everything you need to know about him and his relationship with his brother, but also his decision-making skills.
So then you get the other kind of big iconic scene was when Michael gives him the quote-unquote kiss of death. Yeah. Right? It is in the middle of this big, huge New Year's Eve, I think, celebration in Cuba, where when Michael figures out you've betrayed the family, he walks up to him, plants this big old smacker right on his lips, and then breaks it apart and says, I know it was you. And it's just, and then Fredo knows he's in trouble, followed on not too long ago by the whole, I'm smart, which that scene ends with saying, you're cut off. You're like, I'm done with you. And he even says, when you see our mother, I want to know a day in advance so that I'm not there. Right. Like, I'm done with you. Right. And then he goes to one of his bodyguards and says, I don't want anything to happen to him so long as mother's alive. Yep. Which lets you know as soon as mom goes, he's going to go. And, I'm not spoiling this movie. It's 1974. As soon as mom is dead, Fredo is for all intents and purposes warmly invited back into the family, and it seems like Michael's had a change of heart until one day.
Well, it's a funeral. It's mom's funeral. Yeah. And Michael does see him on the behest of his sister. Yep. But it's, he talk about.
But Fredo wants to take his young nephew, who is Michael's son, out fishing, and they're saying, no, Michael's son has to go away now. And, he goes out on the boat, with another guy.
With his bodyguard.
And then the bodyguard stands up at one point and just puts a bullet in his back. Yep. And that's it for Fredo. But you do see Fredo again before the movie is over. There's this flashback scene at the very, very end. Now, Godfather Part 1 was really all about Michael's struggle. He wanted to be a good guy. He joined the Marines. He's an upstanding citizen. He's going to marry Diane Keaton, for crying out loud, who's just, a wonderful actor, but also, in this kind of setting, just total, Aryan white girl carved out of cream cheese. And it's all about his struggle to, be a part of his family without joining the family business. And of course, the tragic ending of that is that he loses that fight. So now, in this movie, he's like the head of the family. And at the very end of Godfather Part 2, though, we get this weirdly placed flashback, but I think it's brilliantly done.
It's weirdly, but it didn't feel weird at the time.
Because it helps you understand things about this family when you need to understand them. And this is where James Caan comes back, right? Yes. So here's this scene that happens. Actually, it's a flashback that would have happened pre-Godfather 1, just before the movie. Yes. Where Al Pacino announces to his family he's going to join the Marines. Right. And everyone's giving him shit about it. And the only person who's got his back in the entire room is Fredo. He's the only one who reaches across the table and says, I'm with you. Good job. That sounds great, Mikey. That sounds like a great thing. And he is kind of bucking his family by doing that, but of course doing it in this very kind of
but again, it's that
kind of way.
Middle child peacekeeper kind of thing. And that he's still trying to do that. But again, he's going to feel like that is Michael getting his own thing. Because again, at that age, Fredo's still trying to figure out what is my own thing going to be. Yeah. And of course, we know, even by this time in the movie that we're seeing this scene, we know he doesn't get a thing.
No, I mean, he's dead. But I mean, the character's actually been resurrected, as has James Caan, just for this scene.
But but that scene was a good one just because it was Michael showing where Michael was. Yeah. And with regard to the family, because it takes place at Vito's birthday party.
And how far he's come, because really the final moments of Godfather 2 were, he's lost his brother. His sister is, she's around, but they're estranged. They don't have a real relationship. Yes. He's lost his marriage. His wife had what he thought was a miscarriage, and he later finds out was an abortion. And he's as successful a mafia leader as he could have ever hoped to be. But other than that, he has nothing. And it's a real moment of human tragedy. But Fredo is definitely a part of that puzzle. Is one of those things he really fucked up and he lost.
It's one of those where, again, you talk about relationships and you talk about what is your priority. And at one point, his priority was his family. And then it was his family that he was creating with Diane Keaton. And he promised her he was going to turn the whole family business around to whether it was legitimate.
Yeah.
But that obviously didn't work out. But again, his family was what was important to him. And yet at the end of the day, he did go ahead and say, I mean, for all, he didn't say the words, but for all, he did his little nod and was saying, go kill my brother.
Yep.
And so it's one of those whether, you can walk away with what kind of lesson I guess you want to, the money and greed over familial obligations, or is it also that when you get caught up in crime and that sort of thing, that it can change, your ethics and your morality to where up is down and down is up and all of that sort of thing. But I think that the relationship, you see it in, the bits that are the, quote, current bits that are taking place in the 50s between Fredo, and that he is trying to help Fredo. He tries to be that brother, and the older brother. He takes on the older brother role.
He's the leader of his family.
Because he's the leader, and he tries to give Fredo what he can, but there's only so much. Fredo's just not a bright bulb, and it's unfortunate because it did start when they were little children.
And he says, I've tried to take care of you. And Fredo's response is, you're my baby brother. Exactly. You don't get to take care of me. I should be taking care of you. And you just look at him and go, oh God, honey. Fredo, no.
Oh, sweetie.
It's adorable you think that, but no. Let's take a hard turn into something completely different.
No, for something completely different. Okay, so here's what's funny about this. There are two versions of this movie, and Eric and I watched different versions.
Yes. When Stacey said we should watch Sabrina, I instinctively thought, well, we must be watching the Audrey Hepburn, Humphrey Bogart version because it'll be vastly superior to whatever remake that, Harrison Ford and Greg Kinnear could have come up with, but no.
I was looking at Harrison Ford, and I was looking at the 1995 version. Here's what I'm going to say about this. This is, to me, very much of the ones that we've talked about so far. It's the more traditional brother relationship in that, and it's for either movie. And I guess what we're talking about with regard to brothers holds true for both movies. In that it is, you have an older brother and you have the younger brother. You have the heir and the spare. And you have the older brother is very devoted to taking care of the family.
He does the right thing.
He, is not messing around and being silly. He went to the school he was supposed to, and he's, taken on the leadership of the company. Meanwhile, the spare is a young playboy doing what young rich playboys do.
Yeah. It was very much of my high school days, the way the world viewed Prince Charles and Prince Andrew.
Yes, which it's at one point for about 5 minutes, people kind of were looking at William and Harry that way. Although I think that Charles and Andrew were more of it than William and Harry. William and Harry really did some good things early on. They set up some. It's a different kind of world, but I agree with you.
Harry's a nice young man. Harry seems to be a very stable, nice young man.
But they both went into causes and took on some of their mom stuff when they were in their teens. So they really, Harry's said some things. He's worn some questionable Halloween costumes. Everybody's done some stupid stuff in this age of social media and whatnot. But at the end of the day, I remember Charles, and again, I was very young when Charles was single and doing, but he had this reputation of this huge playboy, as did Andrew. Yeah. They both were. But anyway, all of this to say that in Sabrina, the story is not about the brothers per se. The story is about this young chauffeur's daughter who falls in love with the younger one and goes to Paris and kind of gets all smoothed over and comes back.
She's very Parisian when she returns. At least Audrey Hepburn was in the version that I saw.
Yeah, is it Binoche?
Julia Ormond.
Ormond, sorry,
yep.
is as well. And they come back and they're just very much more sophisticated. And the younger one, Greg Kinnear and William Holden,
yep.
are the young ones, and they start flirting, which for Sabrina, the character of Sabrina, is great.
Heaven.
But in the meantime, for kind of the same reason, but kind of a different reason, it comes to the notice of the older brother, Humphrey Bogart or Harrison Ford, depending on which version, that this flirtation between Sabrina and the younger brother can ruin a business.
Well, and in the 54 version that I was saying, that Humphrey Bogart was so busy arranging this marriage that needed to be arranged to secure some business interests for the family.
Yeah, that's what Harrison Ford was doing.
Okay, same thing. Yeah. So there was this whole plan to marry you off to somebody, and now and no one believed for a minute that younger brother was going to take this relationship with Sabrina seriously. This was just a distraction, and he'll be on to the next one in a moment. But like, why now? Why now? Why did you have to choose this time to like be infatuated with a new girl when we're trying to get you married off to this heiress that we can combine our family fortunes and make a lot of money?
Right. So it's a timing thing. So in order to do this, Humphrey Ford, how's that? Is that right? Or Harrison Bogart. Harrison Bogart decides to start his own flirtation with Sabrina to distract her from the younger brother. Yeah. He does so by he and I believe it's the same, they get hurt the same way in that they put a champagne glass in their back pocket and
sit on it.
The brother, Harrison Bogart, makes the younger brother sit on it, and so he's out. He can't do a lot of walking.
So Greg Holden is in pain. Oy vey. And Juliet
Hepburn.
Audrey
Ormond. Anyway, so basically it's a love story between the older brother and Sabrina, the chauffeur's daughter. Yeah. And that's what the movie is about, their relationship.
And of course, typical rom-com, they're very ill-suited for each other, or so it would seem at the beginning, and then eventually they realize they're perfect for each other, and that's where it gets lovely.
That they love each other, and love trumps all, and it's all good. So in the end, Greg Holden is fine marrying the girl. Yeah. So it all works out. Now, having said that, as I said, to me, this was a more traditional brother-brother relationship, and that the younger brother is flighty, he's immature, because he can be. Yeah. Because the older one has taken on the mature, stable role.
Yeah. And in the version that I saw, it also kind of makes sense because the younger brother is so much more attractive than the older brother. I don't know if that's exactly true in the version you saw. Greg Kinnear is nice to look at.
He is very pretty. Now, at the same time,
Harrison Ford's no chicken either.
Harrison Ford is pretty too, but he's older. And I think, having said that, Humphrey Bogart in his day was considered, women loved him.
He had some sex appeal, but it's.
But no, here's
William Holden versus Humphrey Bogart. Like, I could totally see why Audrey was all about William Holden. Yeah,
she should have stayed that way.
Yeah,
I had a problem with that version. One reason is I don't feel like there was any chemistry between Humphrey Bogart and Audrey Hepburn.
No.
So
Humphrey Bogart wanted Lauren Bacall to play that role, which would have been so wrong.
It was
so wrong
on a lot of levels.
I mean, I don't know how Lauren Bacall could have ever played those initial scenes where she was supposed to be wide-eyed,
dowdy, looking. No,
dowdy, but also wide-eyed and innocent, and just like, oh, gee, the world is so. I just love him so much.
At that time, Audrey, I think Lauren was too old. Lauren was too
old. Yeah, but I mean,
she's only 19 years. No, anyway, you know what?
When Lauren was 19, she was too old to play Sabrina.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Yes. Oh, that too. But that's when she met him. But that was in the 40s.
Yeah.
So I think she was too old for the part. But the brother relationship was one that I felt like was that kind of thing that we've seen all the time.
Yeah.
Where, they finally, the younger brother grows up and the older brother loosens up.
And what's charming about, again, the version that I saw, you've seen them both. At the end, William Holden is actually really happy for his brother because his brother found love. And he's been so And he's actually more than happy to say, oh my gosh, if you're in love with Sabrina, it's a miracle you're in love with anyone. Like, go get her.
Yes.
And you realize that while William Holden's character was widely seen as very irresponsible, and for a lot of really good reasons, he actually does have a point that, it can't all be all about work. You can't live your entire life in the boardroom and say that that's going to be fulfilling at the end of the day. And so he's the one that actually pushes Humphrey Bogart, like, go get that boat, like, go find her. You need to make this happen.
And that's what happens in the other version as well. In fact, so when Greg Kinnear goes to the office at the end, near the end, he's like, so which one's mine? He doesn't even know which office this is because he hasn't been in the office building very much. But what happens is at the end, he is pushing his brother out. He says, I got this. I can take care of this. We're going to do this merger. I'm going to marry this girl because I do actually love her. They set it up a little differently in the second Sabrina than they did the first. So it's a little bit more believable. But he says, it's covered. And Harrison says, you have never, ever replied or made any acknowledgement. I send you information every day about what's going on. And Greg looks at him and says, and you assumed that I didn't read them. And in the second one, the idea with Greg's little brother thing was, he said, nobody expected it of me. Nobody expected anything of me, so I didn't do anything. But when they did expect it, he was able to step up to the plate. But his idea was, everybody kind of labeled me early on as I was the playboy who didn't have any care in the world, and I was irresponsible. So I did that. He said, but I actually could do it. If everybody had looked at me seriously. So that kind of goes to the whole Fredo thing, is that, given a little bit of responsibility, they can actually, maybe step up to the mark.
Except Fredo couldn't have.
Fredo couldn't have. I know he couldn't have. Fredo was no Greg Kinnear. But
who is, really?
But the whole point being that, so Greg kicks him out and says, go get her, go after her now, because this is what you really want. But he also says, but I can take care of this. Yeah. And I think that's, it's a fun story about brothers. As I said, that's not the main target with it. It's a rom-com.
Yeah.
But that brother relationship, you do kind of have to believe it.
Yeah.
In order for you to feel like, okay, the older brother is okay flying after her.
And it doesn't take much setup. I mean, as soon as you barely need an introduction to these two men, and you totally get, oh, you're the older, you're the younger, you're the this, you're the that, you're the responsible, and you're the playboy. Got it, ready to go.
Right, you get who they are, but you don't necessarily get what I will say that and even with Humphrey and William Holden, you see that there is some affection. They do like each other, and you certainly do with Harrison and Greg. Is that there's some moments that they add in there that are very, brotherly, and just they roll their eyes when mom says something. And they both roll their eyes because it's mom kind of thing, which they have a mom in the second one. But I think
they have mom in the first one too.
It's okay. I don't remember that part. But anyway, there is that brother relationship, and I think that in order, it was well done. I feel in both of them that I believed that they did care about each other, even though they had, put them as, you're this. They had labeled them and put them in these little, pigeonholes. Yeah. In the end, they cared enough about each other to say, okay, I'm going to take this on. I mean, either sacrifice is too strong a word, but to take on responsibilities.
So when we come back, if you think that we couldn't have come up with two movies that were as different as Godfather 2 and Sabrina, we're going to do it again when we come back.
Open wide, it's your prescribed dose of Pop38 with Eric and Stacey.
So we've got two more movies to talk about as they relate to exploring brothers on screen. And then I've got a brief honorable mention that I want to throw in at the very end. The first, and again, as I mentioned before we left on our break, these two movies could not be more different from one another. We're going to start with John Singleton's 1991 film, Boys in the Hood, which when it came out, I did not see.
I didn't see it when it came out.
No interest in seeing it whatsoever. It just seemed like I thought it was a movie about hip-hop. At the time, it was a music form that just did not connect with me. I couldn't connect with it. Nothing in my background kind of led me to this thing. It's a great movie.
It's a very good movie. I do think that it is a first-time director's movie.
Yes.
There are some directorial choices, but here's what I'm going to say. If he did nothing else, he got an amazing cast.
Yes.
Holy cow.
Yeah, I think the cast, which includes Lawrence Fishburne and Angela Bassett, Ice Cube, Cuba Gooding Jr., Morris Chestnut. I mean, really, really just fine
Holy
group of,
crap.
the women in this movie are amazing.
But
really, really good cast.
But
when I say great movie, I mean a movie with a lot of potential. Like, you could tell John Singleton has a lot of potential, and he got some really good performances.
Oh, most definitely. And I think that the writing was real.
Yes.
I mean, it was, and it certainly, it connected with people.
Yeah.
And I think it was, the African-American community embraced it because they felt like, oh, this is close to what we are.
And he had something to say with this movie. He wore it a little bit on his sleeve, maybe a little too much. I think a filmmaker who'd been doing this for a while.
It's easy, and that's part of this. Keep in mind that this is looking back in hindsight, and also, yes, he's a newbie.
Yeah. So he definitely had a point he wanted to make. And sometimes the point was more important than the story he was telling.
Yes.
So there is that, but it really a powerful film. I will say it was really. I
think I agree.
Yeah. So the brothers at the heart of this thing are named Doughboy and Ricky. They're half brothers, and they live in South Central L.A. Now the main character is Trey. Trey is Cuba Gooding Jr., who lives with his dad, Lawrence Fishburne. Used to live with Angela Bassett. Has moved to South Central L.A. to live with his dad. Dad speechifies a lot about how to be a responsible African-American man, which is part of the whole thing that's going on here. But there is this really interesting brother relationship with his two best friends, or half brothers, who again could not be more different.
Yes, they're very different.
There's the responsible one. Ricky's very responsible. Doughboy's he's a gangbanger. And so he's involved. And you see him when they're little kids at the very beginning. You see him being carted off by the cops when he's probably 13, 14 years old. And then when the movie kind of jumps in time a little bit, and now these are all young men, it's no surprise Doughboy's been in and out of jail. Ricky's looking at going to college on some kind of football scholarship, and he wears a varsity jacket, and he's, really good at his studies. Clearly mom's favorite, at least, this is the one that she's proud of.
Yes.
And Doughboy's kind of, he's there, and
it's Ricky he has the potential to get out.
Yeah.
And that's what I think every mother in that neighborhood was looking is to help get your kid out.
Exactly. And that was Lawrence Fishburne's whole point too, was, we're going to do everything we can so that you can go have a life.
Yes.
And that includes don't get your girlfriend pregnant. They're very kind of upfront about, what sex is. Are you wearing condoms? Yep. It was just not trying to be.
And again, I think it's one reason it resonated was that it was, that African Americans could look at this and say that's a representation of us that is closer to anything that we've seen.
Yeah.
Anybody else do.
Yeah.
And John Singleton, knew he is, so he part of that community. So again, it's nice to have. We've talked about this before, seeing yourself represented on screen in a realistic way, as opposed to a version of what another demographic might have a perception of you about. And so, yes, it was very real. It was very edgy. It wasn't pretty.
No.
The first scene to me blew me away, where the kids are walking and they walk through a crime scene.
Yep.
And you're just like, they're not blinking. It's normal.
And they're like, hey, do you want to go see? There's a body. Let's go look at it.
It's another Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever. And my heart just broke.
And just gunshots just happen in this movie just intermittently, and people hear them and they react to them, but they're just like,
but it's
just
not
another Tuesday in South
Central. We need to call the cops.
Yeah.
It's again, then when you put it into, it's 1991, it's not now. It's just like, holy crap, have we gotten better at all?
Yeah.
And that was another takeaway I had is, I'm not real sure. Again, this is one of those where technology aside, it's yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the brothers' relationship with each other It was, and again, it was that whole thing that, Doughboy it's a gangbanger and all this. And I think Ice Cube did a lovely job, by the way.
He was his very first movie.
He was in it. It was, I just thought he did it really
very natural.
I always like watching him on screen. I'll be honest with you. Anyway. And then, Morris Chestnut. Now, it's an unhappy ending.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether I'm spoiling anything.
I don't think, no, I think we go ahead and spoil this one, because for the first half of the movie, it's really, you just kind of see the way they're both treated by their mom. Now Ricky has a son by his girlfriend, so it's like, it's not, somebody might look at him and say, well, he's not perfect either, but you see how mom treats Ricky and you see how mom treats Doughboy. And that's really kind of, it's a study in that relationship. And then the shit hits the fan. About 2/3 of the way through the movie, there's this rival gang that is just, they're not very well drawn as characters. They're just a bunch of assholes who just go around killing people. And Ricky gets gunned down in broad daylight, wearing his varsity jacket in the middle of an alley, right? Running from this gang. The most harrowing scene in the entire thing was when they bring his body back home, and his girlfriend and the mother of his child and his mother they just lose it, right? Because this young boy was their hopes and their dreams, right? And immediately mom turns on Doughboy. I blame you for this. This is your fault that this happened. And it was not. Doughboy was nowhere around. It literally had nothing to do with it. And so you saw the injustice of that while you're also mourning with these women.
Well, yes and no, it wasn't. I mean, it was a gang that was after Doughboy. They knew who the guy was.
Yeah.
I don't say it was his fault, except that it was, they were going after him.
Sure. But mom really at that moment probably, Doughboy had just also lost his brother.
Correct.
So it was a mean thing to say.
Yes.
It was a hard thing to hear.
And it was an emotional thing, but again, it rang really true.
Yeah.
Because when you're in that moment, which again, it was stark. I found this very stark. And even in its starkness, I will say to you, probably still prettied up from reality.
Maybe.
Because the shirts were clean and things like. I mean, it's just one of those things where I sit there, and as awful and horrific as that is, I'm thinking, but you know what? This is still a movie that I'm going to walk out of in about in 30 minutes. And also, all of these are it's one of those where you hate to think that it's real, and yet it felt very real.
Yeah, and that was John Singleton's point, is that this is happening.
Yeah.
He was trying to tell people, like, this is what life in South Central is really like. So Doughboy then immediately just says, I'm going to, we need to get these guys. Yeah. I'm going to get my revenge. And so it's interesting that even though, Doughboy as a character could have had every reason to really resent his brother, who got all of his mother's affection, and he was the promised one. There wasn't ever a doubt in anyone's mind. Now the moral dilemma became, is Trey, going to go along with this?
Correct. And and that's a big decision that he makes. But I think the brother thing, the connection there, I think Doughboy felt basically the same as his mom. Mm-hmm. You're the one who has the potential to get out. I don't. Yeah. I've had this history of in and out of jail. Mm-hmm. This is, the streets is who I am, and this is probably how I'm going to go down. Yeah. I think that's Doughboy he had resigned to that. Yep. Whereas he always felt like his brother had that chance, and he was pushing for it. And when this happened, this tragedy happened, it just kind of flipped a switch for him. Yep.
So he went after him. He does get his revenge.
He does.
And then there's a kind of a final scene between Trey and Doughboy on the porch of Doughboy's house, and he talks about the fact that his mom still blames him, and it's like, I never even had a brother, and all this kind of stuff. And Trey says to him, it's like, you still got one brother.
Yes.
So as it kind of relates to the theme of this show, there's another kind of brotherly bond. It just does show you that you don't necessarily have to be related to somebody. And then, of course, the subtitles, come up to end out the movie, and the subtitles inform us that Doughboy's going to get killed 2 weeks from now by this, people who are affiliated with the
other
ones
guys.
that he killed.
Yeah. It's never ending is the whole idea that, this film is over, but not everybody's riding off into the sunset.
Yeah.
And
Trey does go to college, and his girlfriend goes to a neighboring college, and that's what you learn.
So there is a happy ending there, but Doughboy does not have
But not
one.
for everybody, and this is a real thing. And Ricky had a lot of potential, and he was gunned down.
And that happens all the time.
Last thing I want to say about this movie, though, is so interesting the way they use the word brother, because, of course, in the African-American community, that has a lot of other meanings.
Mm-hmm.
People who are part of that community, refer to each other as, when we talk about the brothers and the sisters, that's who they mean. There's a black cop in this movie who shows up early on and has a scene with Lawrence Fishburne, and Lawrence uses that word to him almost like a weapon.
Yes.
When he is being so horrible, he's like, okay, brother. And it's just this whole damning thing about you have betrayed your entire community. Let me just remind you for a moment who you are. And it just struck me as I was watching this movie, kind of thinking, okay, I'm looking for all the brother themes. That one just popped out and hit me over the head like a hammer.
Yeah.
How this kind of happens. And John Singleton has some harsh criticisms for a lot of people within the African-American community. It's one of those, it's kind of like The Color Purple. There are very few white people in this movie.
It's true.
But at the same time, they talk about how, and Lawrence Fishburne has actually, it's a speech and it gets really political, but it's a great speech about how, they are the victims of a larger white supremacist society that makes sure that there's gun stores and liquor stores everywhere so that we will continue to drink and kill each other, while everyone else gets rich off of, the gentrification that's going on.
Well, and as I said, it's one of those where watching this in 2017 was just very, I can't believe that this could have been made yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just you add social media and it could have been made yesterday.
Yeah. And I recommend it. It's a great movie, and it plays out like a Greek tragedy in a lot of ways.
It is very much like that's a good analysis.
It's inevitable that all of this is going to go down exactly the way that you see it. But very, very well done, and always love to see Lawrence Fishburne and Angela Bassett on screen doing anything. And the woman who played Ricky and Doughboy's mom, I don't know who she is. I should look her up.
But I've seen her. Yeah,
she was great.
She's very
and
good.
in that horrible scene with the the morning scene, very powerful.
Yeah. Okay, then we're going to take another left.
Hard left. Into Disney World.
Into animation. So when we're talking about brothers, I thought about this movie. It's a movie that my children absolutely adore. Came out in 2003, so it's actually older than I thought it was.
Yep.
It's Disney's Brother Bear.
Yep.
And there was a Brother Bear 2. Meh. Brother Bear, the original.
I don't see where they would take a sequel, having seen Brother Bear.
I forget where they took it, but neither of my daughters really cared for it that way. I don't even remember it that much. But basically,
there are three brothers in this one.
There are three brothers.
And no parents.
But they do mention that they had already, passed on. It's they're Native Americans or Native
Alaskans,
I think. And
a lot of snow.
And they have very much the native, tribal kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And they have and
the Northern Lights figure prominently. So
right, which is why I was saying it up there. So there's these three brothers that are now taking care of each other. Mm-hmm. The youngest one, and again, we talk about birth order.
Yeah.
And so you have the older one who is he took on clearly the guardian role when the parents died. Then you have the middle kid who is trying to do the right thing and keep peace between everybody. Then you have the little one, the youngest, the baby, who just goes crazy, does whatever the hell he wants to because his brothers will clean it up.
Yep.
And
so the very first time you see them, he's like, get down, and he's running over a hill, and this herd of caribou or antelope or something with hooves is running right towards him, and they all have to get under like these kayaks, to keep themselves safe. And after it's over, the youngest is like, that was so cool, and the other two are like, you almost got us killed.
Correct.
Yep.
Correct. So, interestingly enough, what's happening is it's almost the youngest time to go through the manhood thingy.
It's like a bar mitzvah.
Yeah, it's exactly like a bar mitzvah. and at the end of that, you get your totem.
Yep.
Given to you by the old shaman woman who's come from the mountain and
spoken to the gods.
Burning bush, whatnot. There was no mention of burning bush. That was just me. She comes down and she has a totem, and you each get one. So, like, the oldest brother has the Eagle of Leadership, and then the second one had what was the animal? Something
I don't remember
of
the
wisdom.
animal, but it was wisdom.
Was wisdom.
Yep.
And so the younger one, and once you get on this totem and you go through this ritual, that's what you go through this ritual, and you put your handprint on this big rock. And that's a big deal. Once your handprint's there, then you're a man. Everybody treats you like it's mature man, yada, yada, yada. So the youngest one, the kid,
Kenai,
is looking to do that. He's very excited about that. In the meantime, he does something stupid. And where were they, hunting or whatever?
He leaves. They were fishing. He left a basket of fish out.
Right. They left a basket. He was supposed to tie the fish up. He tied it up so the bears don't get it. And he hates bears, by the way. He ties the fish up, but then the knot comes undone. The fish fall out. He wants to get to the celebration, and he noticed the fish are down on the floor, on the ground, but he really wants to get to the celebration, so he doesn't go back and retie them. He goes to the celebration. When they get back and see the fish are gone, the oldest brother, Sitka, the leadership guy, is like, okay, we got to go do it then. We got to go get more fish. That's what we'll do. So off they go.
But the youngest is like, I'll get the fish back. I'm going to go get revenge on this bear.
Correct. The youngest one is really ticked off at the whole bear issue, and so he goes after that.
Especially because the middle child gives him shit.
Correct. Again, the younger two egg each other on. They have that sibling rivalry brother thing. So, can I nutshell this here? Nutshell, all this crap happens. The oldest brother ends up dying.
Yep.
And
saving his two younger siblings from the bear.
Yes, the bear is coming after the two younger ones, correct, and the older one sacrifices himself to save his brothers.
Yep.
And
now they're really pissed, especially the youngest one is really pissed at this bear because you killed my older brother.
They're very angry with the bear for killing the older brother. The middle child, the middle one, who's now the oldest alive one, is pissed at the younger one because of how it all happened, which kind of frankly
deserved
valid. So then what happens is Kenai gets into this big fight. He finds the bear and kills the bear.
Yep.
So the middle child is looking to get to them. So the middle brother is looking for him and hasn't gotten there. Kenai has killed the bear. Then suddenly this weird magical stuff that kind of reminded me of Beauty and the Beast.
Yes, it was the standing up, being suspended and twirling.
Twirling thing and the lights from the skies and whatever happens.
Except instead of the beast turning into a prince, this young Native American guy turned into a bear.
He turns into a bear, which when the middle brother finally gets to where the dead bear was, he finds this live bear.
And his brother's clothes.
Because obviously bears don't wear clothes in this particular Disney movie. So then Kenai has to run away because his brother is going to kill him.
Yep.
And so basically the whole time he's kind of running away from his brother, but also trying to find a way to get back to his body.
Yep.
Then, you want to take it from here?
Sure. So the shaman woman meets him and recognizes him right away and says, your brother did this. This is your older brother's doing. He must have done it for a reason. And if you want to get your body back, you're going to have to go back on top of the mountain where the light meets the earth. So that's his quest for the entire movie. Meanwhile, middle brother's chasing him, trying to kill him.
He's got to run away from him.
And the only way for him to get up there through a series of events I'm not going to get into is this young cub that he meets knows how to get to this mountain.
Coda.
And so Coda, who's this adorable, the voice actor did a great job in this because he's not cloying at all.
It was adorable.
Totally adorable. But it becomes this reluctant buddy thing where I need you to get me to the mountain, but I don't really like you and I think you're a pain in the butt. But off we go.
And the younger brother, as a bear, becomes the oldest brother in this buddy relationship. The little Coda is totally depending on him. And Coda's lost his mom.
Yeah.
His mom
they've been separated.
And so last he saw her, she was alive and fine. So it's not a deal. He's just trying to get back to the fam.
And he knows that, if we go to this salmon run, where all the bears go to eat the fish, she'll probably be there. So I just need to get back to there. So off they go. And adventures ensue.
Yep.
But eventually, they get back to, to where he can become a person again, just at the moment that the middle brother is about to kill him. And as all this is going on, of course, predictably, he and Coda have developed a relationship,
Sure.
and it's not nearly as antagonistic as it began. And so, what was really kind of surprising to me about this was that, of course, at the end, he's going to get turned back into a person, but he's going to have learned some valuable lessons, right?
Correct.
Can I spoil this one?
I think so. I mean, it's a Disney movie. Come on.
Yeah. So what happens at the end, which was actually kind of surprising to me, was that he decides that, Coda, this cub, he needs me more than you need me. And he actually makes the decision to turn back into a bear,
right,
and live the rest of his life so that this young cub, because the other thing we found out is that bear that he killed was Coda's mom.
Right. So what they do is when they end up, so Coda is telling the story to the big group of bears at the salmon run.
Yep.
And that's when Kenai realizes that he had killed Coda's mom.
Yes. He is responsible for Coda being an orphan.
Correct. So there is this moment where now we see the same story that we saw earlier from a different point of view, from Coda looking through the bushes.
Yeah.
And I thought that was fascinating. I thought it was a great thing. So here we have this, it's not that the bear is always bad, so kill it. It was not anything black and white. A lot of gray in this. Now, having said that, that doesn't say anything to the whole brother subject, but it did show that suddenly Kenai, from being the youngest baby, very much like Coda,
who felt no accountability in his life for any of his actions.
Suddenly, he, had to become the oldest, and he was now the role model. He was now the person that was being depended upon. And
the first thing he had to do was fess up. He had to confess.
And he did.
And he did.
Yeah,
and it was
pretty.
It was a tough scene to watch. And actually, they smartly played a whole Phil Collins soundtrack while he was talking,
always.
so you didn't have to,
Always. Phil Collins and Tina Turner. So you were good to go music-wise. Here's another thing, and this is a little asterisk with regard to brothers and this movie. Do you remember SCTV, the McKenzie brothers?
Oh, yes.
Dave Thomas and Rick Moranis. They are in this. Not as the McKenzie brothers, but as these two elk, I guess.
Moose. No, they were moose because the whole Canadian thing.
Oh, that's right. And they're talking like Canadians. And so their brother, Beauty, Hoser. They're these Moose brothers.
Yes.
And so you see a little bit of their relationship too. And so that was kind of fun.
And so adults, they're going, "Oh my God, it's the McKenzie brothers." I mean, if you know anything about them, you've ever seen them do that before.
And it was hysterical because they have these Canadian accents talking like this, and they're just as stupid as McKenzie brothers were. And it's perfect. I thought that's adorable. But it's also just another nod to brothers, which again was what this movie was about. Because in the end, his oldest brother Sitka was right. He had that leading kind of thing in that, yes, this is what you need to learn, and this is how you're going to do it. And in the end, the middle brother did learn wisdom because he understood you've got to see things from different points of view. And not what you see is not always what is really there. And but I mean it was a very enjoyable movie. And again, as you said, from an adult standpoint, because the little kids don't get the McKenzie brothers, from an adult standpoint, that
but they'll still laugh because they're very funny.
They're very stupid.
Rick Moranis and Dave Thomas are just funny. Two tiny things I want to say about this movie before we leave it. One is just very quick, but it's just silly. Their last line, the McKenzie brothers, as they leave. And they've gotten into a fight, a brotherly fight, and they've just made up. They're leaving, and they're always talking about how much they enjoy eating because moose like to just graze and eat. They're decided to go eat some amber wheat on a bed of malted hops, and I'm like, that's beer. They're going for beer.
Yes. Because with the McKenzie brothers always drank beer.
And that was just, again, it was one of those things like, kids aren't going to get that. Kids aren't going to understand amber wheat on a bed of malted hops. They're never going to, but I was like, oh my God, they're going to get a beer.
It was a throwaway, but it was a nice little detail.
Yep, for the adults in the room.
For the adults.
The other thing I just have to say, which I enjoyed this movie more than I expected to. It did its Disney magic. It did its thing. I actually got a little teary at points during this. I mean, it does. It's moving. It totally works its magic. But can I just rant for a moment about Disney's orphan porn?
I give you a moment. I have to give you that.
Oh my God. Like when you find out, and I should have seen it coming a mile away. Didn't think to really what's the big reveal going to be? Like I wasn't in that frame of mind while I was watching it. But when you find out that the bear that Kenai killed was Coda's mom. Coda doesn't know mom's dead, but Kenai does, and he feels terrible about it. And then when you do find out, of course, the big tear is welling up in Coda's eye because, they go to the top of the mountain where the spirits are, so he does get to hug his mom one last time, which makes it worse. What is it in the world of these people at Disney that they think it's a normal experience for little children to lose all their parents? Like, it's in every single movie you've ever seen.
Okay, so here's what
this?
Here's what I'm going to say. Here's why I'm going to say this. I do not think it's the idea that everybody loses a parent. I think it's the idea that you as a kid are on your own. And I don't mean that as an orphan. I mean that I think the idea, when you're a kid, your parent is just this adult authority figure. You don't see them as people. You don't see them as human. You don't see them as having feelings or anything like that. So when you're watching a Disney movie and the parent isn't there, it's just kind of a shrug. It sounds awful. I don't mean to sound too cold. If you haven't gotten to know the parent, then you're just kind of... I just think it's about
when it comes to the parents of these three brothers, they were just absent, and I guess I missed the line that said they'd passed away, but I was just like, do these boys have parents? I guess not.
No.
And that's one thing. That's one form of Disney kind of doing its thing, right? But then, there's a direct line between Bambi's mother and Coda's mother. I mean, they do this. They kill off mothers.
Yes, they do.
For our morbid sense of
I don't think it's
grief.
morbid.
I mean, it's just it was a lot.
I think that the reason is to raise the stakes. I also, if you go to the movie Hook, there's a line where she says to Hook, the little girl, Peter Pan's little girl, says to Hook, "You need a mommy." And I think that that's kind of the deal, is that the worst thing that can happen to you is that your mom is gone.
Yeah.
And so they're really raising the stakes to say you're on your own. Yep. I think that's what it is. It's
Cinderella
awful.
had no mom. Ariel had no mom. Belle had no mom.
And look at the shit
Aladdin
that happened.
Have no parents.
Look at what happened to them.
But what is it with this orphan thing? I mean, it bugs me. I mean, come up with a new idea, Disney.
Well, first of all,
stop killing off the moms and making me cry in my kitchen on a Saturday morning.
Okay, here's what I'm
trying to watch a cartoon
about Cinderella and that stuff. Those are old school. Those are the Brothers Grimm and shit. So you need to blame them. That's not Disney's fault that the stepmother is awful. They just did the story, but it's old school. It's misogyny. It's old school misogyny, is what it is. Well, go back to the Brothers Grimm.
Brave is the only Disney movie where the heroine has two parents.
That's new, though. That's a new story.
I know, but that's
your old stories don't do that. They don't care because it's misogyny.
All right.
Rant.
Okay, rant over. What's our final diagnosis about all these movies about bros?
I think that you're going when you make
bros
a movie,
before hoes, Stacey.
Did you?
I did.
You?
Mockingly, but I did. Ironically.
I'm going to wait till you stop interrupting for a second. Jesus. So here's the deal. I think that when you make a movie about brothers or you make a movie about sisters, you go at it in a different way. Because a sister-sister bond is different from a brother-brother bond, but also the potential for drama is different. Nobody is going to worry about who's the prettiest boy at the party. They're not. It's going to be Fredo wants to know who's he have to kill to get some respect. You know what I mean? So I think that it is a difference between boys and girls, but I also think that it's just familial stuff. Movies about family relationships, they have the potential for so much drama. Mm-hmm. And the brother-brother thing is, I think that, there's some that we didn't touch. There was one that we thought about, but it was just so awful. We didn't want to deal with it. It was twins. I mean, there are, and that was the idea of these two men who didn't know they were brothers, and they meet each other, and it's an awful It's a really bad movie.
Don't watch it. 0 stars.
Don't. But my point is that there are a lot of ways stories can go about brothers, but they are going to go in different ways than stories about sisters.
Yeah.
And of course, what we haven't talked about is the brother-sister thing.
Which I have plans for season 2 to get.
So, but again, I think that there are some really good ones out there, and I think that we talked about some of them, and clearly they run the gamut. You don't like cartoons? You've got 4 other ones that we talked about that we think you should take a look at.
From Boys in the Hood to Brother Bear to Sabrina to
that's right. And if
Godfather 2.
You want to watch one with your kids, we've got a couple in there that you can do. So again, they are all over the map, but they each, I think, hit some really strong points.
Yeah, that was going to be my final diagnosis, is just looking at these and just how much variety there are in all these movies, which tells you how universal this particular subject matter is. That anybody who has siblings, I think no matter the gender, you can relate in some way. I don't have a brother, but I could relate to a lot of the stuff that was in a lot of these films. Before we say goodbye for this episode, I did want to throw in a little thing about my honorable mention. I was so sad. There was a movie that I really wanted to talk about this week that we couldn't, because we couldn't find it anywhere. And it was The Fabulous Baker Boys. Oh, yeah,
which is another great
from
story
1989.
About brothers, and I couldn't find it anywhere.
Michelle Pfeiffer was nominated for an Oscar. It was a really important movie in her career. Real-life brothers, Beau Bridges and Jeff Bridges, played these dueling piano player brothers.
Yep.
And they had an act, and Beau was like the stable family guy, and Jeff Bridges was he was an alcoholic kind of mess. But he was
very talented.
But he was the more talented of the two, and he actually had dreams of being a great musician, but it was never going to happen so long as he was in this cheesy act with his brother.
In hotel bars.
And so they decided to spice up their act by bringing in a singer, which was Michelle Pfeiffer. And then, of course, Jeff Bridges and Michelle Pfeiffer have an affair, because why wouldn't they? They're so gorgeous. Yeah. They really were in 1989. And it kind of messed things up for them. And it really kind of brought into stark reality, like, what different priorities these two brothers had. Beau just wanted to feed his family. He wanted to provide a stable life and he thought, if I can do this through music, I'm the luckiest guy in the world. Hotel bar, schmotel bar, whatever. Jeff Bridges working with a really amazing singer like Michelle Pfeiffer and being alone on New Year's, because I think Beau Bridges had some kind of family emergency. It's been a while.
Yeah.
But it's a great movie. So my last little thing is, do better, internet. What the hell? Like, we should be able to see these are great movies. They're out there. They're available nowhere. It's like, I feel trapped in this moment of, like, you think everything's accessible to you at all times.
But
I couldn't find this movie anywhere, and it just made me really sad.
But it is a very good example of the brother relationship as well, and also it was fun to see Beau and Jeff working together.
Yeah.
Anytime you get the Bridges together, it's always fun.
Yeah. So anyway, a lot of ground to cover, a lot of different kinds of movies we were able to kind of get into today. This family shit is complicated. That's my last word.
It is. So anyway, that's brother. I guess I should shout out to my own Scott.
Hey, Scott. How you doing?
This is Pop38.
I'm Eric.
I'm Stacey. Follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, and subscribe.
You've been listening to Pop38 with Eric and Stacey. Check out our website at poparationroom.com for links to our blog and other extras. Don't forget to subscribe to Pop38 via iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Google Play, YouTube, and other podcast locations. You can also follow at Pop38 Room on Facebook and Twitter. Music provided by purpleplanet.com.